I feel a little more comfortable wearing the beanie talking about hockey than I did talking about Jorge Polanco, but you know, it is what it is. Kraken played 3 games and they went 1-2. And oh boy, were the results similar and then very different. They lose to the Carolina Hurricanes 4-1. They lose to the Maple Leafs 4-1. And in between that, they have an 8-2 win over the Montreal Canadiens. Before I get into the positives and negatives, I have to thank Simply Seattle and remind you that if you use code MOLLYWOP15, MOLLYWHOP15, you can save 15% off your order. It's a great deal from great people. Link in the description to make it nice and easy. But thank you so much, simplyseattle.com. And that code again, MOLLYWHOP15. Let's start with the negatives. The Kraken looked like the much worse team against the Carolina Hurricanes. And does that shock me? No. No, not even a little bit. The Kraken are a fine hockey team, I think. I know the Carolina Hurricanes are a good hockey team. I think that this could be their year. Now, I've been saying that for a few. But I think that this could be this year. Just the depth they have, the system that they play, the chemistry that is so obvious when they're on the ice. They're a wagon. They are a really, really good hockey team. I think that's the best team that the Kraken have played thus far. And they looked overmatched. The disappointing thing here is that you looked overmatched at home. I'd love to see a little bit more of a home ice, benefit. They don't have that yet. I don't know if they'll ever have that. Well, yes, I do. Yes, I do. I know how loud that place is going to get when this hockey team gets really, really good. And, it's not like it's a quiet place, but I don't know. I'd love to see the Kraken just do a better job in home games because they got destroyed against the Hurricanes. The Maple Leafs lost. Now they're shorthanded. They've been shorthanded for a few of these games anyway because Vince Dunn isn't healthy. But no, Brandon Montour clearly hurt them against the Maple Leafs. Now, is he worth 3 goals? It depends on if you watched how much credence you take for that game against the Canadiens. But obviously it hurt. It obviously hurt not to have a player of his talent. But it was just a poor offensive effort. And against a very mediocre goalie, Jacob Wolf certainly has some long-term appeal. Should get more than one past him. And, as good as Freddie Anderson is, 1-goal efforts aren't acceptable. Offense has just got to be a little more consistent. And I think that leads to your positives because you saw in that game against the Canadiens what this team is capable of offensively. No, I'm not asking for 8 goals. But you see the cohesion. And I think one of the biggest positives is I think Matty Beniers has looked a heck of a lot better as of late. I think that Jared McCann and Jaden Schwartz and Jordan Eberle are all having outstanding seasons. It's great to see Burakovsky get on the scoreboard. Boy, they need more out of him. But what you really saw was you saw a star performance, a elite performance from Brandon Montour in that game. The type of guy that, no, he's not like a top 5 player or even a top 15 player. But you saw that elevated performance that you just haven't gotten from Kraken players, especially last year. Now, look, Jared McCann, I believe, has 14 points in 9 games, something like that, or 14 points over his first 9 games. He's having a great year, and he's a good player. But Brandon Montour is just a different animal. Absolutely a different animal. Love seeing the 4 assists from Chandler Stevenson. I think he's been very solid to begin his Kraken career. Jaden Schwartz, who we talked about. Riker Evans probably doesn't get enough credit as well. he looks to me like he has a chance to be a first line defenseman. Not going to guarantee it, but there are just enough flashes from him at a pretty young age to suggest that he can get there. And I would kind of like to see him playing more than Alexiak at this point. Now, in that game against the Canadiens, Alexiak gets 20 minutes and got a goal and assist. So good for Big Rig. But I think Riker Evans needs to get more ice just to establish himself as one of these future guys. They're in an interesting position where, yes, you're trying to win. Obviously, you're trying to win. But developing young players is important, which is why, even though Shane Wright has gotten off to a bit of a slow start, even though Beniers has not necessarily been as good as we hoped, this guy's got to play because number one, they've got to develop. And number two, you have to find out what you have in them. You have to find out what exactly they are. Now, Matty Beniers already has the long-term contract, but you also want to get the most out of that. Let's not be silly, especially in a capped league. That's important. But you got to play those young guys, and you also have to, not only because it gives you the chance to win, and you want to be careful with, you know what I'm saying, but it's a thin line. Those guys have to be productive, but you can't just completely bench them either. Because as important as it is to win now, you've got to develop for the future. So those guys got to get, and I think Dan Bosma's done an excellent job of that so far. And speaking of excellent jobs, I think Joey Daccord, even in an effort where he gave up 4 goals in 2 games, well, actually, he only gave up, I believe, 3 goals in each of those games because of empty netters. But I thought he was outstanding. In particular, I thought he was really good against Carolina. Now, he gives up 3 goals, but he saved 35 shots and 16 of those shots on the power play. That's really impressive. And I think the biggest positive that I have taken so far, and I don't mean this as a huge insult to Groovy, is that Joey Daccord is your number 1 tender. And that's how you need to operate going forward for reasons that we just talked about with Shane Wright and Matty Beniers. You just gave Joey Daccord a long-term contract. And yes, you are paying Philip Grubauer an awful lot of money to be a backup tender. But Joey Daccord's development is one of the most important things for this team going forward. So you gotta treat him like the everyday goalie. Have to. And I thought, even if you take a look at the results and say, those aren't super impressive, I think those of us who watched probably came away a lot more impressed with Daccord than unimpressed. I sure did anyway. Yeah, I thought despite the fact that they, lost 2 of 3, that game against the Canadiens, that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of hope because I see it's there. I see that it's at least possible, to compare this team to the Mariners. We saw a few before September offensive games that gave us a glimmer of hope, but not enough. The Kraken have already had an 8-goal game, a 7-goal game, a 6-goal game, a 5-goal game, 4-goal games. The last two of the last 3 have not been good enough. And I want more consistency offensively. Don't get me wrong. But I think I've seen enough to suggest that, this team has the capability of being an offensive force. So they're capable of being an offensive force. I think they have a legitimate number 1 goaltender. I think they have, when healthy, a couple of star defensemen. The question mark is that enough? Because it's just so hard to win in the NHL if you don't have that superstar. And we talked about Montour, really great player. Chandler Stevenson, really good player. Matty Beniers, really underrated at this point. Weird to say. two-way player. They don't have that star. And you've seen in this so far this year what stars can do. You've seen in the NHL what stars can do. You've also seen, like, look, does Florida have better players than the Seattle Kraken? Of course they do. Seattle took one of those players, but you don't have to have one of those top 5 guys to win a cup. But you gotta have something pretty great. I'm not sure if they have something pretty great based on what I've seen. Good, definitely, very good, especially Brandon Montour. Talk about it all I want. And again, congratulations to him on the little one. Adorable. All babies are adorable, but what a cutie. The baby. I have no opinion on Brandon Montour's looks. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe. Really appreciate the support. Back next week. Back with a bunch of Seahawk, Mariner, Washington Husky stuff. Basketball starting pretty soon. Glutton for punishment. Thanks so much. And go Kraken.